A Werewolf Shifter Romance, written by Amelia Hart. Chapter 1. Scars and Silence. The hot iron pressed against Iris's forearm before she could pull away, and the scent of burning flesh mingled with the cloying perfume that always clung to Lucinda's chambers. She bit down on her tongue hard enough to taste copper, refusing to give the Luna the satisfaction of hearing her cry out. Blocked wolves carried a muddled scent, like rain over cold ash. A nose could miss it. A court could dismiss it. Hiding had been easy because her own body did most of the hiding. "Clumsy girl," Lucinda said, her voice dripping with false concern as she lifted the heated metal rod. "You really should be more careful when you're styling my hair. What if you had burned me instead?" Iris kept her eyes downcast, amber gaze fixed on the polished stone floor. "Forgive me, my lady." Through the ornate mirror, she caught Lucinda's reflection. Golden hair cascading in perfect waves, ice-blue eyes glittering with something cold and hungry. Beautiful, cruel, and utterly untouchable in her position as Luna of the Valdrin pack. The burn on Iris's arm throbbed in time with her heartbeat, joining the constellation of scars that mapped nearly 5 years of torment across her skin. "You're forgiven," Lucinda purred, reaching back to pat Iris's cheek with deceptive gentleness. Her fingers lingered just long enough to press against an old bruise. "Just try not to disappoint me again." The words carried layers of threat that only Iris could hear. To anyone else, Lucinda Fairmont Valdron was the picture of grace. A Luna who embodied everything a pack could want in their alpha's mate. Poised, elegant, devoted. But here, alone in these chambers, the mask slipped away to reveal the monster beneath. Iris resumed her work with steady hands despite the fresh wound. Her fingers moved through the familiar motions of braiding and pinning, creating the elaborate style Lucinda demanded for tonight's gathering. The Luna would descend those grand stairs looking radiant, would smile sweetly at Alpha Godric when he returned from patrol, would charm the visiting dignitaries with her wit and warmth. And Iris would remain invisible, as she had learned to be. The memory came unbidden, as it often did in moments of pain. She was 14 again, crouched in the corner of a small cottage while shadows moved through the darkness outside. Her mother's hand pressed against her mouth, muffling any sound. "Stay quiet, little wolf," her mother had whispered. Amber eyes, so like Iris's own, bright with terror. "No matter what happens, you survive. Promise me." Iris had nodded, tears streaming down her face as she made a promise she would spend the next 10 years keeping. The rogues had come in the deep hours before dawn, their scents wrong and wild, carrying the stench of madness and blood. Her father had shifted immediately, his brown wolf launching toward the door with a snarl that shook the rafters. Her mother had followed, white fur erupting across her skin as she joined her mate in desperate defense. Iris had tried to shift for the first time that night, had felt her wolf surge forward, desperate to protect, to fight, to survive. But the sight of her father's throat being torn open, her mother's agonized howl as she fell, had shattered something fundamental inside her. The transformation had seized halfway through, pain exploding through every nerve as her body tried and failed to complete the change. The rogues had left her there, thinking her just another human casualty, not worth the effort. She had lain among the bodies of her parents until dawn, her wolf trapped and screaming inside her, blocked by trauma too severe for her young mind to process. For 3 days she had wandered, half mad with grief and hunger, until she collapsed near the walls of Stronghold Valdrin. Mabel had found her. The old cook had been gathering herbs in the forest when she stumbled upon the girl's unconscious form. Most would have seen just another orphaned human, but Mabel's keen eyes had caught the amber tint in Iris's eyes, had recognized the faint scent of wolf beneath the dirt and blood. "Poor lamb," Mabel had murmured, gathering Iris into surprisingly strong arms. "What horrors have you seen?" The cook had smuggled her into the castle kitchens, had fed her broth and bread, had asked no questions when Iris remained silent for weeks. Eventually, the girl had spoken, had shared the truth in broken whispers. She had a wolf, but it was trapped inside her, unreachable, broken. "Best not to mention that to anyone, dear," Mabel had advised gently. "Shifters who can't shift proper, well, They're treated worse than humans who never had a wolf at all. Safer for everyone to think you're just a foundling without the gift. So Iris had become invisible. She worked in the kitchens for 6 years, silent and efficient, learning to read the moods of the castle's inhabitants, learning to anticipate needs before they were spoken, learning to survive. She had been 20 when everything changed. It was the spring of her 6th year at Stronghold Valdrin, when Alpha Godric had married Lucinda Fairmont. The union had been political. Everyone knew that. The Fairmont territory controlled valuable trade routes, and their alliance strengthened Valdrin's position against rival pacts. The Alpha had done his duty, as leaders always did. Lucinda had arrived like a winter storm wrapped in silk and smiles, and within months the castle staff had learned to tread carefully around her. But she saved her cruelest treatment for those who could not fight back, who had no power to challenge her. The incident that sealed Iris's fate had been absurdly simple. Alpha Godric had returned early from a border patrol, striding into the kitchens with dust on his boots and weariness in the set of his broad shoulders. His dark hair had been tied back, revealing the strong line of his jaw beneath his neat beard, and his gray eyes had swept the room with the natural authority of a leader assessing his domain. For 3 seconds, just 3, his gaze had landed on Iris as she bent over a cutting board. Their eyes had met, and something in his expression had shifted. Recognition, perhaps, or simply curiosity about the quiet kitchen girl with the unusual amber eyes. 3 heartbeats that had changed everything. Lucinda had been standing in the doorway, had witnessed that brief exchange, and her pretty face had gone cold. The Luna had smiled at her husband, had taken his arm with practiced grace, but her ice-blue eyes had found Iris across the room. The next morning, Lucinda had demanded that the girl with the odd eyes be reassigned as her personal attendant. That had been 4 years and 9 months ago. Mabel had tried to intervene once, 3 years into Iris's service. The old cook had gone to a trusted guard, had whispered concerns about the suspicious injuries that kept appearing on the Luna's attendant. The guard had vanished the next day, reassigned to a dangerous border post. A young servant girl who had been friendly with Iris had disappeared entirely shortly after. The message had been clear. Interfere, and people died. So Mabel had learned to offer what help she could in secret. Extra food hidden in Iris's sleeping quarters, healing salves left where she would find them. Silent companionship in the pre-dawn hours when Iris's duties allowed her brief moments of respite. It was the only kindness Iris knew in a world that had forgotten her. "There," Lucinda said, admiring herself in the mirror. "Adequate work, I suppose. Now fetch my blue gown, the sapphire one." "Yes, my lady." Iris moved to the wardrobe, each step measured and careful. Her arm still burned where the iron had seared her skin, but she had learned long ago how to function through pain, how to hide the trembling in her hands, the tears that threatened when the abuse became too much to bear. Inside her chest, something stirred. Her wolf, trapped and silent for 10 years, pressed against the cage of her trauma. It howled soundlessly, desperate for freedom, yearning to break through the barriers that kept it chained. But Iris pushed it down, as she always did. The world had no place for broken shifters. No mercy for those who couldn't complete their transformation. Better to be thought human and powerless than to reveal her defect and face worse scorn. She had made a promise to her mother, all those years ago in the darkness. Survive, no matter the cost. So she would endure another night, another day, another year if necessary. She pulled the sapphire gown from its hanger and turned back to her tormentor, carefully blank expression firmly in place. Lucinda was already humming, pleased with herself, anticipating the evening ahead where she would shine as the perfect Luna, while her husband remained blind to the monster he had married. And Iris would be there, invisible in the shadows, bearing her scars in silence. Chapter 2. Blood and Judgment. The drums of war had finally silenced along the northern border, leaving Godric Valdrin with nothing but the weight of victory and the hollowness that always followed battle. 3 weeks ahead of schedule, he guided his warriors back through the mountain passes toward home, eager to wash the stench of death from his skin and sleep in his own bed for the first time in months. The setting sun painted the stone walls of Stronghold Valdrin in shades of amber and gold as they approached. Beautiful, he supposed. Though beauty had become a foreign concept during 5 years of a marriage that felt more like a political contract than a union of souls. Lucinda would be there, playing the dutiful Luna, and he would play the returning hero. They had both become exceptional actors. What Godric didn't expect was the scream that echoed through the castle corridors as he dismounted in the courtyard. Iris's hand shook as she fastened the final clasp on Lucinda's sapphire gown. The fabric had torn along the seam, a deliberate cut the Luna had made herself moments before, though no one would believe that truth. Already Lucinda's face had transformed into a mask of fury, ice-blue eyes glittering with something dangerous. "You ruined it," Lucinda hissed, her voice low enough that no passing servant would hear. "You clumsy, worthless creature. This gown cost more than your miserable life. My lady, I can mend it." "Silence!" The word cracked through the air, and then Lucinda's hand was in her hair, yanking Iris's head back with vicious force. "You think I don't see what you are? What you've always been? A threat." Iris's vision blurred with tears she refused to shed. "Please, I've done nothing. You exist." "That's enough." The first strike of the leather whip caught Iris across the shoulders, tearing through her thin dress and splitting skin. She gasped, more from shock than pain. Lucinda had never been this brazen, this careless about leaving marks that might be seen. The Luna was losing control, and that terrified Iris more than the beating itself. The second strike landed across her back. The third wrapped around her ribs. And something inside Iris, something that had been dormant and compliant for nearly 5 years, finally snapped. Her hand shot out instinctively, catching Lucinda's wrist mid-swing. For one breathless moment they stared at each other. The Luna shocked that her victim had dared to fight back, and Iris equally stunned by her own audacity. "Let go of me," Lucinda snarled, her beautiful face twisted with rage. Instead, Iris pushed. Not hard, not violently, but enough to break free of the Luna's grip, enough to make Lucinda stumble backward, and Lucinda, ever the actress, let herself fall. The Luna hit the floor with a theatrical cry, one hand flying to her head as if she'd been struck. The whip landed perfectly in Iris's trembling fingers, placed there by Lucinda's quick movements, though any observer would swear the servant had been wielding it all along. "Guards!" Lucinda's scream carried through the castle halls. "Help! She's attacking me!" Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. The door burst open, revealing 3 guards with weapons drawn. Their eyes swept the scene, their Luna on the floor, tears streaming down her perfect face, a visible red mark blooming on her cheek where she'd scratched herself during the fall, and Iris, standing over her with the whip still clutched in her hand and blood dripping down her back. "Seize her," the lead guard commanded. Iris didn't fight as rough hands grabbed her arms. What would be the point? The evidence was clear, the story already written. She had attacked the Luna. That's what everyone would believe, what the law would recognize, and the punishment for such a crime was death. As they dragged her toward the dungeons, Iris caught a glimpse of Mabel in the corridor. The old cook's face had gone pale, her weathered hands pressed to her mouth in horror. Their eyes met for one brief moment, and Iris tried to convey everything she couldn't say aloud. "Thank you for your kindness. Don't intervene. Save yourself." Then the darkness of the dungeon stairs swallowed her whole. Godric was halfway to his chambers when Oswin intercepted him, the beta's weathered face grave with concern. "Alpha, there's been an incident. Your presence is required immediately." The formality in his oldest friend's tone made Godric's wolf stir restlessly. "What kind of incident?" "The Luna was attacked by one of her servants. The girl is in the dungeons awaiting your judgment." Godric's jaw tightened. Lucinda had a habit of causing drama whenever he returned from campaign, usually some elaborate scheme to secure his attention or sympathy. "Attacked how severely?" "A mark on her face. Some bruising. Nothing that requires a healer's immediate attention." Oswin paused, and something in his expression shifted. "But Alpha, you should see the servant girl before you make your judgment. There are inconsistencies. Valdrins had no statute for mercy, but an Alpha's word could become custom in a breath. Godric made it so that night, in cases clouded by doubt, the healer examined first. The blade fell last. It was a loophole only authority could carve, and he carved it wide enough for the truth to walk through. That was unusual. Oswin didn't question pack law lightly, and the law in this matter was crystal clear. A servant raising a hand against the Luna was punishable by immediate execution. No trial, no appeal, no mercy. It was one of the oldest laws, designed to protect pack leadership from those who might abuse their positions of service. Very well. Take me to the dungeons first. The cell was dark, lit only by a single torch that cast dancing shadows across damp stone walls. The girl sat in the corner, knees drawn to her chest, and for a moment Godric couldn't see her clearly. Then she lifted her head, and amber eyes caught the firelight. Recognition hit him with unexpected force. The kitchen girl from years ago. The one with the unusual eyes. The one Lucinda had requested as her personal servant shortly after their marriage. He'd barely thought of her since that day. Had assumed she'd been treated well in the Luna's service. The assumption shattered the moment he truly looked at her. "Stand up," he commanded, his alpha voice carrying automatic authority. The girl rose slowly, each movement stiff with obvious pain. Her dress was torn and soaked with blood, fresh wounds across her shoulders and back that hadn't been treated. But it was the other marks that made Godric's breath catch in his throat. Old scars layered across her arms, the kind that spoke of repeated trauma over months or years. Burns in distinct patterns, cuts that had healed poorly, the evidence of systematic abuse written across her skin in a language no alpha could misread. His wolf surged forward, snarling with protective rage that had no business existing for a stranger accused of attacking his Luna. But the instinct was undeniable, overwhelming, wrong in a way that made Godric question everything he thought he knew. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. "Iris. Alpha." Her voice was barely a whisper, hoarse with exhaustion or tears or both. "And you attacked my Luna?" Iris swallowed hard, and Godric watched her throat work around the words. "I pushed her when she struck me. I just wanted her to stop." The honesty in her admission caught him off guard. A guilty person would have denied everything, would have pleaded innocence or claimed self-defense more forcefully. But this girl simply stated the facts, as if she'd already accepted her fate and saw no point in fighting it. "Show me your back, all of it." Iris hesitated, shame and fear warring in her expression. But she obeyed. She turned and let the ruined dress fall forward, exposing skin marked by what must have been years of torture. Fresh welts from tonight's beating crossed over older scars. Burn marks, cuts, the distinctive parallel lines left by a whip used more than once. Something dark and furious uncoiled in Godric's chest. These weren't the injuries of a single incident. A moment of violence between servant and mistress. This was a pattern of sustained cruelty, hidden beneath long sleeves and careful silence. "How long?" he demanded. "Nearly 5 years, Alpha." 5 years. The entire duration of her service to Lucinda. The entire span of his marriage. "And you never spoke of this to anyone?" Iris pulled her dress back up, turning to face him again. There was no accusation in her amber eyes. Only resignation. "Who would have believed me, Alpha? I'm just a servant. She's the Luna. And pack law is clear about our respective positions." She was right. And that truth burned worse than any wound. "The law is also clear about your crime tonight," Godric said, his voice cold because his wolf was too close to the surface, too angry to trust himself with warmth. "Attacking the Luna carries a single penalty." "I know." Iris lifted her chin slightly, and Godric saw the strength beneath her submission. This girl had survived years of abuse without breaking, and she would face death with the same quiet courage. "I accept my punishment, Alpha. I only ask that my body be burned properly, not left for scavengers. My parents, they deserved better than I could give them. At least grant me a proper end." The mention of parents struck something tender in Godric's chest. Before he could question the impulse, he said, "I'm ordering a healer to examine you before dawn." Surprise flickered across her features. "Alpha? Standard procedure for all executions," he lied smoothly. It wasn't standard at all, but his beta wouldn't question him, and Godric needed time to think. "Guards will bring the healer shortly. Cooperate fully." He turned to leave, but paused at the cell door. Without looking back, he added, "And Iris, if you're lying to me about those scars, about any of this, I will know. And your death will be far less merciful than the quick end the law prescribes." "I'm not lying, Alpha," she said softly. "I've done many things to survive. But lying has never served me well." Godric left the dungeons with his mind churning and his wolf prowling restlessly beneath his skin. Something about this situation felt fundamentally wrong, and he hadn't stayed alive this long by ignoring his instincts. In her cell, Iris finally allowed herself to break. Tears she'd held back for years spilled down her cheeks as she curled into herself, trembling with pain and exhaustion, and something that might have been relief. Tomorrow she would die, but at least tonight, someone had finally seen her scars. Deep inside her chest, her wolf howled with desperate grief, a sound only she could hear, trapped as it had been since the night her parents were murdered. She pressed her palm against her heart, feeling the creature thrash against its cage of trauma and fear. "I'm sorry," she whispered into the darkness, uncertain whether she was apologizing to her parents, her wolf, or herself. "I tried to survive. I really tried." But survival, she was learning, had its limits. Chapter 3. Truth in Darkness. Oswin descended the dungeon stairs 2 hours before dawn, carrying a torch that cast wavering shadows across stone walls slick with moisture. He'd served the Valdrin family for 15 years, long enough to develop instincts about when something didn't add up. And tonight, nothing about this situation felt right. The girl sat exactly where Godric had left her, knees drawn to her chest, amber eyes reflecting the torchlight when she looked up. She didn't flinch at his approach, didn't scramble backward or plead for mercy, just watched him with the wary stillness of someone who had learned long ago that begging accomplished nothing. "The Alpha ordered a healer to examine you," Oswin said, unlocking the cell door. "But I wanted to speak with you first, off the record." Iris tilted her head slightly. "Why?" "Because I've been beta to this pack for long enough to recognize when evidence doesn't match the crime." He stepped inside, keeping his distance to avoid spooking her. "Your injuries are fresh. The Lunas are superficial, yet you're the one facing execution. That's how the law works," Iris said quietly. "Servants don't strike their betters, regardless of provocation." "Provocation." Oswin crouched down to her eye level, studying the marks visible on her arms in the firelight. "Tell me about these scars. The old ones." For a long moment she said nothing. Then, so softly he almost missed it, "What does it matter? I'll be dead by morning anyway. It matters because I've served this pack since before you were born, girl. And I've never known Alpha Godric to execute someone without being certain of their guilt. He's ordered the healer to document your injuries. That's not standard procedure. That's an Alpha looking for reasons to question his own judgment." Something flickered in Iris's expression. Hope, perhaps, or simply disbelief that anyone in power might actually care about the truth. Her hands trembled as she wrapped her arms tighter around her knees. "If I tell you," she whispered, "and nothing changes, then I've betrayed my silence for nothing. But if I stay quiet, then I die having never spoken my truth." She looked up at him, amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "Which way leads to less regret, Beta Oswin? The truth always leads to less regret, even when it hurts." So Iris told him everything. She spoke of 4 years and 9 months of systematic torture, of burns and cuts and beatings that came whenever Lucinda felt threatened or bored or simply cruel. She described how the Luna's mask never slipped in public, how witnesses were silenced through threats or disappearances, how isolation had become her only protection against worse abuse. "She saw the Alpha look at me once," Iris said, her voice hollow with exhausted honesty. "Just once, years ago, for maybe 3 seconds. And she decided I was a threat that needed to be broken." Oswin's jaw clenched. He'd suspected Lucinda was cold, calculating, more interested in power than partnership. But this level of systematic cruelty spoke to something darker than mere political ambition. "Why didn't you report this?" "Surely someone—" "Mabel tried once, 3 years ago." Iris's fingers dug into her arms. The guard she spoke to was transferred to the most dangerous border post the next day. A servant girl who'd shown me kindness disappeared that same night. The message was clear. Speak up, and people die. That tracked with what Oswin knew of Lucinda's methods. The Luna had always been skilled at manipulating circumstances to her advantage, at making problems vanish before they could become threats to her position. There's something else, Iris added, and her voice dropped even lower. Something I've never told anyone except Mabel, and she only knows because she found me when I first came here. Oswin waited, sensing they were approaching the heart of whatever mystery surrounded this girl. I'm not human, Iris said. I have a wolf. I've always had one, but it's been trapped inside me since I was 14 years old, since the night rogues murdered my parents and I watched them die. The confession hung in the air between them, weighted with years of silence and shame. I tried to shift that night, she continued, staring at her hands as if they belonged to someone else. Tried to transform, to fight, to save them, but the trauma was too severe. My body began the change, and then seized halfway through, the most agonizing pain I've ever felt. My wolf got stuck, trapped behind the fear and grief. I've never been able to complete a transformation since. Oswin's breath caught. A shifter with a blocked wolf was rare, tragic, and according to pack prejudice, considered defective. Such individuals were treated worse than humans who'd never had the gift at all. No wonder she'd hidden it. Why tell me this now? Because if I have a confirmed wolf, even a broken one, I have legal rights a human servant doesn't. Iris lifted her chin with fragile dignity. Maybe not enough to save my life, but enough to demand a proper investigation. And maybe, just maybe, that investigation will reveal what the Luna really is beneath her pretty mask. Clever girl, Oswin thought with grudging admiration. Even facing death, she was thinking strategically, trying to protect others from suffering the same fate. If I can prove you have a wolf, he said slowly, everything changes. You'd have the right to challenge the Luna's account, to demand trial by combat if you chose. But I need evidence, and I need it before dawn. You could demand trial by combat, Oswin said. With a wolf that won't surface? Iris's mouth twisted. That's not a trial. That's execution dressed for court. Godric's answer was iron. Then we build a different kind of trial, one made of witnesses and ledgers and scars. The healer will be able to sense it. Blocked doesn't mean absent, just unreachable. Oswin rose to his feet, decision crystallizing. Stay here. Say nothing to anyone else until I return. He left the cell and immediately sought out others who'd worked near the Luna's chambers. The late hour worked in his favor. Tired servants were more likely to speak honestly, less afraid when darkness provided cover. A young maid admitted she'd seen Iris appear with fresh injuries multiple times. But we were told the girl was clumsy, my lord. Accidents happen. An older steward reluctantly confirmed that food orders for the Luna's chambers never included portions for the personal attendant, despite custom dictating that servants ate when their mistresses did. I thought it strange, but it wasn't my place to question the Luna's household management. And then there was Mabel. Oswin found the old cook in her kitchen, grinding herbs with mechanical precision, though her weathered face was pale with distress. You know about the girl in the dungeons, Oswin said. It wasn't a question. Mabel's hand stilled. Iris, her name is Iris. Tell me what you know. The story that emerged painted a picture of sustained abuse that made Oswin's wolf snarl with protective rage. Mabel had found Iris a decade ago, half dead from grief and trauma, and had given the orphaned girl sanctuary. She'd watched helplessly as Lucinda systematically destroyed that same girl over years of service. I tried to help once, Mabel whispered, tears tracking down her lined cheeks. But the Luna made it clear. Interfere. And more people would suffer. So I stayed silent and hated myself for it. That ends tonight, Oswin promised. The healer arrived as the first gray light of pre-dawn began to filter through the high dungeon windows. She was an older woman, skilled in both medicine and the subtle energies that governed shifter physiology. Her examination of Iris was thorough and conducted in tense silence while Oswin watched from the cell entrance. Well? He demanded when she finally stepped back. The healer's expression was grim. The physical injuries are extensive and show clear patterns of repeated trauma over years. Burns, cuts, evidence of malnutrition and systematic abuse. She paused, then added quietly, "And there's something else. This girl has a wolf." Iris's eyes widened in shock, as if even she hadn't quite believed it would be detectable. "The wolf is blocked," the healer continued, "trapped behind severe psychological trauma. But it's there, strong and vital, pressing against barriers this girl erected to protect herself from pain she couldn't process. She is absolutely a shifter, Beta Oswin. Just one who's been unable to complete her transformation. Everything changed in that moment. Pack law was absolute about one thing. Shifters had rights that humans did not. Iris wasn't just a servant who'd attacked the Luna. She was a pack member with a confirmed wolf, entitled to proper investigation and the possibility of trial by combat if she chose to challenge her accuser. Oswin wasted no time. He gathered his evidence, the testimonies, the healer's findings, the documentation of Iris's injuries, and carried it directly to Godric's chambers as the sun broke over the mountains. The Alpha was already awake, staring out his window with the look of a man who'd spent the night wrestling with impossible decisions. He turned as Oswin entered, and his gray eyes were stormy with barely contained emotion. "Tell me you found something," Godric said. "Tell me there's a reason to question what seems obvious." "There are dozens of reasons, Alpha." Oswin laid out everything he'd discovered, watching his friend's expression darken with each revelation. "The girl has been tortured for years. Multiple witnesses confirm it, and the healer has confirmed she's a shifter with a blocked wolf, which means she has legal rights we cannot ignore." Godric's hands clenched into fists. "Bring her to my private chambers, not the audience hall. I want no witnesses to this conversation until I understand exactly what's happening in my own territory." When Iris was brought before him an hour later, washed and dressed in clean clothes but still bearing the evidence of her injuries, Godric forced himself to truly see her, not as a servant, not as an accused criminal, but as a person who might have been failed by everyone around her, including him. "Show me," he commanded, his voice rough. "Show me everything the Luna did to you." Iris hesitated, shame warring with self-preservation in her amber eyes, but she obeyed. Removing the simple tunic she'd been given to reveal skin marked by years of calculated cruelty. Fresh welts from last night's beating crossed over old scars, burn patterns that spoke of hot irons deliberately pressed to flesh, cuts that had been inflicted with precision rather than passion, the evidence of torture that had been methodical and sustained. Godric's wolf surged forward with a snarl that rattled his ribcage. The sound escaped his throat involuntarily. A low, threatening growl that spoke of violence barely leashed. His eyes flashed gold as the beast fought for dominance, desperate to protect this girl who carried wounds that made even a hardened warrior want to tear someone apart. Iris stumbled backward, her amber eyes going wide with pure terror. She hit the wall and slid down, arms coming up to shield her head in a gesture that spoke of long conditioning. She expected violence from figures of authority, expected pain from those with power. That broke something in Godric's chest. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, forcing his wolf back down, making his voice as gentle as he knew how. "Iris, look at me. I'm not going to hurt you." She peeked at him through her arms, trembling, and Godric saw what he should have seen years ago. A victim who'd survived through silence, who'd learned that submission was the only path to staying alive. "Tell me everything," he said softly. "And this time, I'll listen." Chapter 4. Protective Instincts. Godric forced his breathing to steady, pushing his wolf back down with effort that left him trembling. 5 years of marriage to a woman he'd thought cold but civilized. And all the while she'd been torturing an innocent girl in his own castle. The rage that burned through him was volcanic, barely contained beneath years of alpha discipline. "I'm sorry," he said again, softer this time. "Iris, I give you my word. I will not harm you. But I need you to trust me enough to answer my questions honestly." She lowered her arms slowly, amber eyes still wary but no longer quite so terrified. "What do you want to know, Alpha?" "Everything. From the beginning." So she told him. Not just about the beatings and burns, the starvation and isolation, but about the 10 years before that. About parents who'd loved her, who'd tried to protect her from rogues in the night. About watching them die while her wolf screamed to be freed. only to seize halfway through transformation and trap itself behind walls of trauma she couldn't break down. Mabel found me 3 days later, Iris said quietly. I was half dead, barely conscious. She took me in, gave me work in the kitchens, told me to hide what I was, because shifters who can't shift proper are treated worse than humans who never had the gift. Godric's jaw clenched. She was right, and that truth shamed him. Pack hierarchy was built on strength, and those perceived as weak were often cast aside or abused. He'd never questioned that structure until now, until he saw its consequences written across this girl's skin. And then Lucinda requested you as her personal attendant. Yes, because you looked at me once, Alpha. Just once, for maybe 3 seconds, when you came to the kitchens after a patrol. She saw it and decided I was a threat. Godric remembered that day vaguely. He'd been exhausted, hungry, looking for something quick to eat before dealing with paperwork. He'd noticed the quiet girl with unusual eyes and thought nothing more of it. 3 seconds that had sealed this girl's fate for nearly 5 years. She was wrong, he said roughly. You were never a threat to her position. I barely even remembered you existed. Something painful flickered across Iris's face. I know. That's what made it worse, I think. She destroyed me for years over a glance that meant nothing. Godric stood abruptly, needing to move before his control shattered completely. He walked to the window, staring out at the mountains beyond. You're not going to die today. The execution is cancelled. You're being placed under protective custody while I investigate these claims fully. Alpha. That's not a request, Iris. It's an order. He turned back to her, forcing his voice to gentle despite the fury churning in his gut. You have a confirmed wolf, which means you have legal rights regardless of what happened last night. I'm going to use those rights to buy time for a proper investigation. But the Luna... Godric interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous, is going to answer some very difficult questions. And she's going to do it without knowing you're the one who provided testimony. As far as she'll know, this is standard procedure following an incident involving pack members with confirmed wolves. Iris stared at him, hope and disbelief warring in her expression. You believe me? Yes. The word came out with absolute certainty. I've seen enough evidence to know you're telling the truth. What I don't know yet is the full extent of what's been happening in my own territory while I've been blind to it. He called for Oswin, who arrived within moments. Take her to the guest quarters in the East Wing. The comfortable ones, not the cells. Post guards at her door, but make it clear they're there for her protection, not imprisonment. She's to be treated as an honored guest, not a prisoner. Yes, Alpha. Oswin's expression showed approval of the decision. And send for Mabel. I want her testimony recorded officially. The old cook arrived within the hour, her weathered face pale but determined. Under Godric's direct questioning and Alpha command to speak only truth, she confirmed everything Iris had said and added details that made his blood run cold. Incidents she'd witnessed, injuries she'd treated in secret, the servant girl who'd vanished after showing Iris kindness. Why didn't you come to me? Godric demanded, though he already knew the answer. Because I tried once, Alpha, and people died for it. Mabel's voice shook. The Luna made it clear. Interference would only bring more suffering. So I gave what help I could in silence, and hated myself for being a coward. You're not a coward. You survived in an impossible situation. Godric dismissed her gently, then spent the next several hours interrogating servants who'd worked near Lucinda's chambers. The pattern was damning. Every single person questioned admitted to seeing signs of abuse, unusual incidents, suspicious injuries. They'd all assumed it wasn't their place to question the Luna's household management, or they'd been too afraid of retaliation to speak up. By midday, Godric had enough testimony to know the truth beyond any doubt. But knowing the truth and acting on it were two very different things when politics were involved. He summoned his council of elders that evening, presenting the evidence in cold, clinical terms. The 3 ancient shifters listened in grave silence as he laid out the pattern of abuse, the medical documentation, the testimonies from multiple witnesses. The evidence is clear, he concluded. My Luna has violated the code of honor by systematically abusing a pack member for years. Elder Thornwick, oldest of the 3, stroked his silver beard thoughtfully. The evidence is indeed disturbing, Alpha, but we must consider the political ramifications. Lucinda Fairmont is daughter to Alpha Brennan of the Fairmont Territory. Their alliance provides crucial trade routes and military support. To accuse her publicly without ironclad proof could trigger war. I have ironclad proof, Godric growled. You have testimony and medical evidence, Elder Moira corrected gently. But Lucinda will claim the girl is lying, that the injuries are self-inflicted or from other sources. She'll say this is a conspiracy to remove her from power, and her father will believe her, or at least claim to, because admitting his daughter is guilty would shame his entire bloodline. Godric's hands clenched into fists on the table. So I'm supposed to do nothing. Let her continue. We're saying you need to be strategic, Elder Brennan interrupted. Build your case carefully. Gather more evidence if possible. Most importantly, prepare for the political fallout before you make any formal accusations. This isn't just about justice for one abused girl. It's about the stability of your entire pack and the potential for war with a powerful neighbor. The words tasted like ash, but Godric recognized their wisdom. He needed time, needed to be methodical rather than reactive, even though every instinct screamed at him to drag Lucinda before the pack and expose her crimes immediately. Very well. I'll continue the investigation discreetly. But the girl, Iris, remains under my protection. Of course. She has confirmed wolf status, even if blocked. That gives her legal standing. Elder Moira nodded. We recommend placing her in comfortable quarters under the guise of recuperation from her injuries. Tell the Luna its standard procedure while the incident is reviewed. That night, Godric visited Iris in the guest quarters. She'd been bathed, dressed in clean clothes, given food and medical treatment. But she sat on the floor beside the bed rather than in it, as if comfort itself was foreign to her. You can use the bed, he said gently. That's what it's there for. It feels wrong, she admitted quietly, like I'm pretending to be someone I'm not. Godric settled into a chair across from her, careful to keep distance between them so she wouldn't feel trapped or threatened. You're a pack member with a confirmed wolf. That means you're entitled to proper treatment, regardless of what Lucinda made you believe. She'll know I talked. She'll find a way to punish me. She won't touch you again. I promise you that. The words came out with alpha authority, a vow that would bind him as surely as any oath. Right now, she thinks this is standard procedure following an incident between pack members. She doesn't know you've provided testimony, doesn't know I'm investigating her specifically. Iris pulled her knees to her chest, a defensive gesture that made her look younger than her 24 years. What happens next? I'm investigating her past. If she's done this before, there will be evidence. Godric leaned forward slightly. But I need your help with something. I need to understand about your wolf. She tensed. What about it? The healer says it's blocked, not absent. That it's been trying to emerge but can't get past trauma barriers. Has it always been like that? Since the night your parents died? Iris nodded slowly. I can feel it inside me, scratching at walls I built to survive. Sometimes when I'm in pain or frightened, it surges forward, but it can never break through completely. The transformation starts, and then just stops. Like my body remembers failing the first time and won't risk trying again. What if those barriers could be removed? What if a healer could help you complete the transformation? Her amber eyes went wide. Is that possible? I don't know, but I'd like to find out. Godric held her gaze. If you could shift, fully and properly, you'd have even more legal standing. More importantly, you'd have access to instincts and strengths that trauma has kept locked away. I'm afraid, she whispered. What if I try and fail again? What if the pain is too much? Then we stop. No one's going to force you into anything, Iris. But I think you're stronger than you realize. You survived 5 years of systematic torture without breaking. That takes a kind of strength most people never have to discover. Something shifted in her expression. Hope. Fragile and tentative, but real. Why are you helping me? You barely know me. Because something in my wolf recognizes something in yours. Godric thought, but didn't say. Because seeing your scars made me want to tear the world apart. Because I've spent 5 years in a marriage that was duty without warmth. And you're the first person in longer than I can remember who's made me feel anything real. Instead, he said simply, because it's the right thing to do, and because I failed you once by being blind to what was happening in my own territory. I won't fail you again. Iris studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Thank you, Alpha Godric. Just Godric when we're alone. You don't need to be formal with me. Her lips curved in the barest hint of a smile, the first he'd seen from her. That feels even more wrong than using the bed. You'll get used to it. He stood, moving toward the door. Rest tonight. Tomorrow we'll start working with the healer on understanding your wolf better. And Iris? She looked up at him, amber eyes reflecting the lamplight. You're safe here. Whatever happens next, you have my protection. As he left, Godric caught himself thinking about her in ways that had nothing to do with duty or politics, and everything to do with the connection his wolf insisted was there. Dangerous thoughts, given that he was still technically married, but he couldn't deny them anymore. Then he could deny the sun rising. Something fundamental had shifted the moment he'd truly seen her scars, and there would be no going back. Chapter 5. Threads of Truth. The emissary returned after 3 weeks of searching, bringing with him a woman who'd fled the Fairmont territory 5 years ago under an assumed name. She sat in Godric's private study, hands trembling around a cup of tea Mabel had prepared, her eyes haunted by memories she'd spent years trying to forget. Tell me about your time as Lucinda Fairmont's personal attendant, Godric said gently, though his wolf prowled restlessly beneath his skin. The woman, called Nessa, took a shaky breath. I served her for 8 months before I ran. She was meticulous in her cruelty. Never left marks that would show in public. Always had explanations ready for any injury someone might notice. Her voice cracked. The burns were her favorite. She said they taught proper respect. Oswin recorded every word while Godric listened, his rage building with each detail that mirrored Iris's testimony. When Nessa finished, he had her account formally witnessed by the council elders in secret. Combined with the previous evidence, the pattern was undeniable. But Lucinda was Alpha Brennan Fairmont's only daughter. Accusing her publicly without ironclad proof and careful political maneuvering could spark war between territories. Godric needed to be strategic, even when every instinct screamed at him to drag his wife before the pack and expose her crimes immediately. So he continued his investigation discreetly, consulting with the elders about divorce proceedings while maintaining the facade of normalcy with Lucinda. She believed the incident with Iris had been resolved, that the servant was simply recuperating before facing punishment. Meanwhile, Godric found himself spending hours in the guest quarters where Iris stayed. Officially, I'm concluding my investigation, he told her one evening, settling into the chair across from where she sat by the window. But truthfully, I just wanted to see how you're healing. Iris looked up from the book Mabel had brought her, surprise flickering across her face. Why? Because I care about your well-being. The words came out more honest than he'd intended. Is that so difficult to believe? Yes. She set the book aside. People in power don't typically care about broken servants, Alpha. Godric, he corrected. And you're not broken. You're a survivor. Something softened in her amber eyes. Over the following days, their conversations deepened. She told him about her parents, her father's patient teaching, her mother's gentle humor, the way they'd made their modest cottage feel full of warmth and safety. He shared about the pressures of leadership, the loneliness of political marriages, the weight of decisions that affected hundreds of lives. Did you love her? Iris asked one night. When you married Lucinda? Godric considered lying, but something about Iris demanded honesty. No. I respected the alliance she represented. I hoped affection might grow with time. But there was always something cold beneath her beauty. Something I told myself was just aristocratic reserve. He met her gaze. I was wrong, and my blindness cost you years of suffering. You couldn't have known. I should have. A good alpha knows what happens in his own territory. The healer began working with Iris on her blocked wolf, using techniques designed to help trauma survivors reconnect with their shifter nature. Godric attended the sessions, ostensibly to understand the medical aspects, but truly because he couldn't stay away. He watched her face contort with concentration, as she tried to push past mental barriers that had protected her for a decade. watched her eyes flash amber when her wolf surged forward before slamming against invisible walls, watched her cry in frustration when the transformation ceased halfway through, leaving her gasping on the floor. "I can't," she sobbed after one particularly difficult session. "It's been too long. The damage is permanent." Godric knelt beside her without thinking, one hand hovering near her shoulder, but not quite touching. "May I?" She nodded, and he carefully pulled her against his chest, feeling her tremble with exhaustion and disappointment. His wolf hummed with contentment at her nearness, at the rightness of comforting her. Something shifted in his chest, a recognition that went deeper than attraction or sympathy. "You'll get there," he murmured into her hair. "I have faith in you, even if you don't." Iris pulled back slightly, looking up at him with eyes that held something he couldn't quite name. "Why does it matter so much to you? Whether I can shift or not? Because you matter to me," he thought, but couldn't say. "Because my wolf recognizes yours even through the barriers. Because you're starting to feel necessary in ways that terrify me. Because everyone deserves to be whole," he said instead. Their faces were close, breath mingling in the space between them. Godric felt the magnetic pull, saw the way her pupils dilated, caught the subtle shift in her scent that spoke of attraction. It would be so easy to close that distance, to taste her lips, to... He pulled back abruptly, standing and putting necessary space between them. "I should go. It's late." Confusion and hurt flashed across Iris's face before she schooled her expression. "Of course. Thank you for your help, Alpha." The formality stung, but he deserved it. He was still married, still bound by duty, if not affection. Kissing Iris, no matter how much his wolf demanded it, would be a complication neither of them needed. But gods, he wanted to. The breakthrough came during a thunderstorm 3 weeks into the investigation. Rain pounded against the castle walls, while lightning illuminated Iris's quarters in stark flashes. Godric had been working in adjacent rooms, reviewing documents about Lucinda's family connections, when he heard the scream. He burst through her door to find Iris curled on the floor, eyes wide with terror, her body shaking violently. Not from physical pain, from memory. "They came in the rain," she gasped, barely seeing him. "The rogues. Thunder covered the sounds of them breaking down our door. I can hear my mother screaming. I can smell the blood." Godric dropped to his knees beside her. "Iris, you're safe. You're here with me. The storm is just weather." But she was lost in the flashback, 14 years old again, and watching her parents die. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, on the edge of a panic attack that could stop her heart. "Listen to my voice," he commanded with alpha authority, forcing her focus to him. "Feel my hand on your shoulder. You're not in that cottage. You're in Stronghold Valdrin, and I swear on my life that nothing will hurt you here." Her amber eyes slowly focused on him, present bleeding back into past. "Godric? I'm here." He pulled her against his chest again, one hand stroking her hair while the other held her steady. "I've got you." Thunder crashed outside, and she flinched. He began talking, telling her stories about his childhood, about learning to shift for the first time and accidentally destroying his father's study, about Oswin teaching him to track by scent when he was barely 10 years old. Anything to keep her grounded in the present, away from the memories that threatened to drown her. Gradually, her breathing steadied, her trembling subsided, and then, so quietly he almost missed it, "Thank you." They stayed like that for hours, his back against the wall and her curled against his chest, listening to the storm pass while he held her safe. Somewhere in those dark hours, Godric admitted a truth his wolf had known from the moment he'd seen her scars. This wasn't just duty or sympathy. This was something far more dangerous. When dawnlight finally crept through the windows, Iris stirred against him. "You stayed all night. You needed me to." He carefully extricated himself, every muscle protesting the movement. "How are you feeling?" "Embarrassed. You're the alpha, and You survived a traumatic memory triggered by weather. There's no shame in that." He stood, offering his hand to help her up. When her fingers touched his, that same electric current ran through them both. "Iris, I need to tell you something." She looked up at him, amber eyes wary. "What?" He should tell her about the investigation's progress, about how close he was to having enough evidence to confront Lucinda. Should maintain the professional distance that was rapidly crumbling between them. Instead, he heard himself say, "You're not just a responsibility to me anymore." Her breath caught. "What am I then?" "Everything," his wolf whispered. "Mine." But he couldn't say that. Not yet. Not while he was still legally bound to another woman, no matter how hollow that bond had become. "Someone I care about," he said carefully. More than is probably wise, given the circumstances. Something bright and fragile bloomed in her expression. Hope mixed with fear. "I care about you too. But I don't know how to do this. I've never been allowed to just feel things. Everything was about survival. Then we figure it out together. Slowly. No pressure." A sharp knock interrupted the moment. Oswin's voice came through the door. "Alpha, we have a problem." Godric opened it to find his beta holding a piece of parchment, his expression grim. "One of Lucinda's servants was caught questioning the guards about your visits here. She's been reporting back to the Luna about how much time you spend with the girl." Ice flooded Godric's veins. If Lucinda suspected the investigation had expanded beyond routine procedure, she'd either run or escalate. Either option was dangerous. "What does the Luna know?" "That you've been visiting Iris daily. That you seem personally invested in her recovery. She doesn't know about the testimonies we've gathered, but she's suspicious enough to start asking questions." Godric's jaw clenched. The investigation wasn't complete yet. He still needed formal statements from the council acknowledging the evidence before he could move forward with divorce proceedings. But time had just run out. "We need to move faster," he said. "Schedule a private council meeting for tomorrow night. I'm presenting everything we have and demanding formal judgment on Lucinda's fitness as Luna. And if they rule we need more time, then I'll invoke my right as Alpha to dissolve the marriage on grounds of code violation. It'll cause political chaos, but I won't risk Iris's safety for diplomatic convenience." After Oswin left, Godric turned back to Iris. She stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, looking small and vulnerable, in ways that made his protective instincts roar. "This is my fault," she said quietly. "I should have stayed hidden, should have—" "No." He crossed to her in 3 strides. "This is Lucinda's fault. All of it. And it ends soon. I promise you that." She looked up at him, amber eyes bright with unshed tears. "What happens to me when it does end? When the investigation is over and you don't need to visit anymore?" The question held layers of meaning he couldn't fully address yet. But he could offer truth. "I'll still visit. Not because I have to, but because I want to." He lifted one hand, carefully tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "You're not getting rid of me that easily, Iris." Her smile was small, but genuine, and Godric found himself memorizing it, the way it softened her whole face, the glimpse of the woman she might become once she was truly free of fear. Tomorrow, he'd face the council. Tomorrow, he'd begin the formal process of removing Lucinda from power. But tonight, he'd make sure Iris knew she wasn't alone anymore. Chapter 6. The mask falls. The summons arrived at dawn, carried by riders bearing the Fairmont crest. Godric broke the seal with steady hands while Oswin watched, both knowing what it would contain before the parchment unrolled. Alpha Brennan Fairmont demands resolution of the incident involving his daughter within 5 days. Godric read aloud. He expects either the servant's execution or substantial financial compensation for the insult to his family's honor. Failure to comply will result in severed trade agreements and withdrawal of military support. Oswin's expression darkened. They're threatening war without saying the words directly. Because they know I can't afford open conflict right now. The northern border is still recovering from recent battles. Godric set the letter down with deliberate care. But I also can't execute an innocent woman or pay blood money for crimes she didn't commit. What will you do? Force their hand before they force mine. Godric's jaw tightened. Schedule the council meeting for tonight. Public assembly in the Great Hall, not private chambers. I want witnesses to everything that happens. What Godric didn't know was that Lucinda had already discovered fragments of his investigation. Her network of informants had finally pieced together enough to realize she was in danger. The spy she'd planted among the servants had reported his frequent visits to Iris, the testimony gathering, the emissary who'd returned from Fairmont territory with a former attendant. She stood in her chambers now, staring at her reflection in the mirror, her mind racing through possibilities. Running would admit guilt. Denial wouldn't work if he had actual evidence. But there was one option that might salvage everything: turn herself into the victim one final time. The poison she'd acquired from a traveling merchant sat in a small vial on her dressing table, just enough to make her violently ill without killing her, combined with the antidote she'd taken an hour ago. If she collapsed during the council meeting, if she could frame it as the servant girl's final revenge, then all of Godric's evidence would mean nothing against the immediate proof of attempted murder. She smiled at her reflection, ice-blue eyes calculating. She'd played this game for 5 years. One more performance wouldn't be difficult. The great hall filled as evening approached. Council members took their positions at the high table, while pack members crowded into the space, drawn by rumors of important proceedings. Iris remained in her quarters under guard. Godric had insisted she stay away from the assembly for her own protection. Lucinda made her entrance with perfect timing, dressed in sapphire silk that matched her eyes, her golden hair arranged in elaborate braids. She moved through the crowd accepting sympathies for her ordeal, playing the brave Luna who'd survived an attack by a deranged servant. "My lords, my ladies," Godric's voice rang out across the hall, instantly commanding silence. "We gather tonight to address serious matters regarding pack law and the responsibilities of leadership." Lucinda took her seat at his side, the picture of composed nobility. But Godric noted the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes darted to the guards positioned throughout the hall, his most loyal warriors, chosen specifically for tonight. 3 weeks ago, an incident occurred that seemed straightforward, Godric continued. My Luna was allegedly attacked by her personal attendant. Pack law regarding such crimes is clear, but what appeared simple has revealed corruption that threatens the foundation of our territory. Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Lucinda's fingers tightened on the arms of her chair, though her face remained serene. I have spent these weeks investigating not just the incident, but the pattern of behavior that led to it. What I discovered demands justice. He gestured to Oswin, who stepped forward with a stack of documents. Testimony from multiple witnesses. Medical evidence. Accounts from previous attendants, all painting a picture of systematic abuse spanning years. Alpha, surely you're not suggesting... Lucinda began, her voice carrying perfect confusion and hurt. I'm not suggesting. I'm stating facts backed by evidence that will be presented to this council for formal judgment. Godric's gray eyes were cold as winter stone. But first, I invoke my right to question the accused directly. Lucinda's mask slipped for just a moment, a flash of calculation in her eyes, before she schooled her expression back to innocent bewilderment. Accused? Godric? What is this really about? Is it her? Her voice dropped to something hurt and vulnerable. The servant girl. You've been visiting her daily. The whole castle knows. Is this some elaborate excuse to... To what? Expose a monster wearing my wife's face? Godric leaned forward. Tell me, Lucinda, how many of your personal attendants have disappeared or died under mysterious circumstances? The council has those numbers. Would you like me to share them? The hall went utterly silent. Lucinda's hand moved to her goblet of wine, the one she'd personally poured before sitting down, the one laced with poison that would soon make her collapse in seeming proof of the servant's continued vendetta. But before she could drink, Godric continued. I should also mention that I've had guards watching you constantly for the past week. Every movement, every conversation, every meal preparation. Lucinda froze, the goblet halfway to her lips. Drink, Godric commanded with alpha authority that made even the strongest wolves in the room shift uncomfortably. If you're innocent, you have nothing to fear from wine you poured yourself. She set the goblet down carefully. I'm simply not thirsty. Then you won't mind if we have it tested. He nodded to a guard who stepped forward and took the goblet, along with checking your chambers for whatever antidote you took earlier. The color drained from Lucinda's face. Around them, pack members whispered in shock and confusion, trying to understand what was unfolding. You set a trap, she whispered, true fear showing now. I prepared for the only move you had left. Did you really think I wouldn't anticipate you'd try to poison yourself and blame Iris one final time? Godric stood, his presence filling the hall. Guards witnessed you adding something to that wine, The healer will confirm it's poison, and will find the antidote in your chambers, purchased from a merchant whose records show you acquired both substances 2 days ago." Elder Thornwick rose, his expression grave. "Alpha, these are serious accusations. If true, they're true." A guard captain stepped forward. "I personally witnessed the Luna adding powder to her wine cup before entering the hall. I was prepared to intervene if she'd attempted to drink it." Lucinda's composure shattered completely. She launched to her feet, ice-blue eyes blazing with fury that transformed her beautiful face into something ugly. "You dare judge me? I am Luna of this pack, daughter of Alpha Brennan Fairmont. That girl was nothing, a broken servant who deserved every moment of pain I gave her." The admission rang through the hall, damning in its clarity. "She deserved it because you looked at her," Lucinda continued, too far gone to stop now. 3 seconds, Godric. You looked at her for 3 seconds and I saw it. The interest in your eyes, the way your wolf recognized something. So I took her from you. I broke her piece by piece, day by day, until there was nothing left that could threaten my position. You tortured an innocent woman for nearly 5 years because of 3 seconds of casual notice. Godric's voice was deadly quiet. You murdered servants who tried to help her. You violated every code of honor a Luna is sworn to uphold. Honor? Lucinda laughed, the sound brittle and desperate. You want to talk about honor when you're clearly besotted with a former slave? This entire investigation is just you justifying your desire to replace me with someone younger, more broken, easier to control. That's enough. Elder Moira's voice cut through Lucinda's tirade. Lucinda, you have confessed to crimes of systematic abuse and attempted murder. The evidence is overwhelming. This council has no choice but to— Wait, a new voice interrupted. Cold, authoritative, and unexpected. Alpha Brennan Fairmont strode into the hall, his silver-streaked hair and stern features marking him clearly as Lucinda's father. Behind him came several Fairmont warriors, their presence causing immediate tension among the Valdrin pack. Father. Lucinda's expression transformed to relief. Thank the gods. Tell them this is madness. Tell them. I received word 2 hours ago of tonight's proceedings. Brennan interrupted, his face carved from stone. I came immediately because I needed to hear with my own ears whether my daughter had truly brought such shame upon our bloodline. He approached the high table, and Godric noted how the older Alpha's eyes didn't quite meet Lucinda's desperate gaze. I heard her confession, Brennan said quietly. Every word. I was waiting outside the hall to make a proper entrance, and instead, I heard my daughter admit to years of torture, to murder, to betrayal of the Luna's sacred duties. He finally looked at Lucinda, and his expression held nothing but cold disappointment. You are no child of mine. Father, no. The Fairmont family hereby severs all ties with Lucinda Fairmont Valdrin. We disavow her actions, her crimes, and her very existence. She speaks only for herself, not for our territory or our bloodline. Brennan turned to Godric. Alpha Valdrin, on behalf of my territory, I formally apologize for the monster we sent to your lands. We offer no defense of her actions, and will not contest whatever judgment you pass. The political maneuvering was brilliant in its cruelty. By disowning Lucinda publicly, Brennan saved his family's reputation and eliminated any justification for war. He'd sacrificed his daughter to protect his territory's standing. Lucinda stood frozen, betrayed by the very father she'd relied on to shield her from consequences. You're abandoning me? You abandoned honor. You abandoned decency. You brought shame upon everything our family stands for. Brennan's voice was flat. Final. Whatever happens to you now, you've earned. Elder Thornwick rose with grave formality. Lucinda Fairmont, formerly of Valdrin, this council finds you guilty of systematic abuse of a pack member, of murder through negligence and intent, of violation of the Luna's code of honor, and of attempted poisoning with malicious intent. You are hereby stripped of all titles, all rights, and all protection under pack law. You are banished from this territory, effective immediately. Any wolf who harbors you shares your punishment. Godric stood, his next words carrying the weight of Alpha command. Furthermore, I invoke my right to annul, by the old law, Elder Moira intoned. A union without the mark or answering bond is a contract, not a mating. Then let the contract be torn, Godric said. There was never a bond to break, only vows she poisoned. This marriage on grounds of fraud. You concealed your true nature, violated your sacred vows, and betrayed everything a mate bond should represent. We were never truly wed, only legally bound. That bond is now severed. Lucinda swayed, her world crumbling around her. Where am I supposed to go? You can't just... You should have thought of that before you destroyed innocent lives. Godric gestured to the guards. Remove her from my sight. Give her 1 horse, basic supplies, and escort her to the border. After that, she is no longer our concern. As guards approached, Lucinda's mask reformed one final time, fury and hatred replacing desperation. She looked at Godric with pure venom. You'll regret this. The broken girl you're protecting will never be whole enough to be Luna. She'll fail you just as I apparently failed to kill her properly. The only thing I regret, Godric said softly, is that it took me so long to see you for what you truly are. They dragged her from the hall, her screams of fury echoing off stone walls, until distance finally muted them. The assembled pack remained in shocked silence, processing everything they'd witnessed. Alpha Brennan approached Godric privately. I didn't know. For what it's worth, I truly didn't know what she was capable of. But you knew she was cold. Calculating. You sent her here knowing a political marriage wouldn't require warmth. Yes, Brennan admitted. I thought that was simply her personality. I didn't realize it masked something darker. He paused. The girl, Iris, will she receive compensation? She'll receive justice and protection, and every resource needed to heal from what your daughter did. Godric's eyes were hard. Our alliance is intact only because you acted honorably tonight. Don't test my mercy further. After Brennan left, Godric immediately went to Iris's quarters. She stood at the window, having heard the distant commotion, but not knowing what transpired. It's over, he said simply. She turned, amber eyes wide. What happened? Lucinda confessed. In front of the entire pack, she admitted everything. Her father disowned her publicly. The council banished her. The marriage is annulled. He crossed to her in 3 strides. You're free, Iris. Truly free. The words seemed to take a moment to penetrate. Then her legs gave out, and Godric caught her before she hit the floor, holding her as she finally broke. Great, racking sobs that had been held back for nearly 5 years spilling out all at once. It's over, he repeated, his hand gentle in her hair. She can never hurt you again. I promise. Chapter 7. Healing and Union. 2 weeks after Lucinda's banishment, Iris woke to sunlight streaming through windows that faced east, warming the guest quarters she still occupied. She stretched carefully, testing the limits of healing flesh. The physical scars were fading under the healer's ministrations, accelerated by her shifter nature once she stopped living in constant stress. But the deeper wounds would take longer. Good morning, Mabel's voice called through the open door. The old cook entered carrying a breakfast tray laden with food, more than Iris could eat in 3 meals, but Mabel insisted on compensating for years of forced starvation. The Alpha asks if you're feeling well enough for training today. Training. The word still felt foreign. Godric had arranged for a veteran warrior to teach her self-defense, claiming every pack member should know how to protect themselves. But Iris understood the deeper purpose. Learning to fight back was part of reclaiming power that had been stolen from her. Tell him yes, Iris said, surprising herself with the eagerness in her voice. The Council of Elders had begun pressuring Godric about securing a new Luna within days of the annulment. Political marriages were proposed with alarming frequency. Alliances that would strengthen trade routes, settle border disputes, demonstrate Valdrin's continued power despite the scandal. Godric refused every single suggestion. I will choose my own mate when I'm ready, he told Elder Thornwick with finality that brooked no argument. The pack is stable. Our alliances remain intact. There is no urgency that justifies another loveless political arrangement. What he didn't say, but what his wolf knew with absolute certainty, was that he'd already found his mate. She just needed time to heal before he could court her properly. He visited Iris daily, always careful to maintain enough distance that she wouldn't feel pressured or trapped. They talked about everything and nothing: pack politics, her progress with the healer, memories of her parents, his frustrations with elderling interference. The connection between them deepened with each conversation, comfortable in ways his marriage had never been. The healer wants to try something different tomorrow, Iris told him one evening as they sat in the castle gardens. 3 weeks had passed since Lucinda's banishment, and Iris was finally comfortable enough to venture beyond her quarters. She thinks if I can connect with the memory of my parents, the good memories, not just the trauma, it might help unlock my wolf. How do you feel about that? Iris pulled her knees to her chest. A gesture Godric had learned meant she was processing something difficult. Terrified, but also hopeful. I've spent 10 years trying to forget that night. Maybe it's time to remember everything else instead. I'll be there if you want me to be. Or I can stay away if that's easier. She looked at him, amber eyes reflecting the setting sun. I want you there. The session 3 weeks after Lucinda's banishment was the most intense yet. Iris sat cross-legged on the floor of the healer's workspace, Godric in a chair behind her, close enough to provide comfort, but not so close he'd distract her. Tell me about your mother, the healer prompted gently. Not about how she died, about how she lived. Iris's voice was barely a whisper at first. She used to sing while she worked. Old songs from her grandmother's pack. I didn't understand all the words, but the melody was beautiful. Her eyes drifted closed. She smelled like pine needles and bread. She always had flour on her hands. Good. And your father? He was patient. So patient. He taught me to track by scent when I was 6. We'd spend hours in the forest, and he never got frustrated when I made mistakes. A small smile curved Iris's lips. He had this deep laugh that made his whole body shake. Now remember the night they died. Not the violence, the love. They fought to protect you. They wanted you to survive. Iris's breathing quickened, her hands clenching into fists. Inside her chest, her wolf stirred. Not with the violent desperation of the past, but with purpose. With recognition of what had been lost and what remained. They loved you enough to die for you, the healer continued. Your wolf tried to emerge that night to protect them. It's been waiting ever since, trying to honor their sacrifice. Let it out, Iris. Let it be free. Something inside her fractured, not painfully, but like ice melting after a long winter. Her wolf surged forward, and this time when Iris reached for the transformation, the barriers didn't slam shut. They dissolved. Her eyes blazed amber gold, claws extended from her fingertips. Fangs pushed past her lips. It wasn't a complete shift, but it was the farthest she'd gotten in 10 years. Her wolf was there, present and aware, no longer trapped behind walls of trauma. Godric's own wolf responded instantly, recognizing hers with a soul-deep certainty that made his breath catch. The connection wasn't just attraction or affection. It was fate. True mate. The bond his kind rarely found but always yearned for. Iris opened her eyes, amber fading back to human awareness, but with her wolf now accessible, tangible, real. I did it, she gasped. Godric, I did it. He was beside her in an instant, pulling her into his arms, holding her as she laughed and cried simultaneously. His wolf hummed with contentment, finally allowed to be close to its mate, finally able to protect and cherish what belonged to it. I'm so proud of you, he murmured into her hair, meaning every word. The attack came at midnight 3 days later. Iris woke to a sensation she'd never experienced before. A wrongness in the air, a prickling awareness that danger approached. Her newly awakened wolf sensed it first. Hostile intent, multiple sources, moving toward the castle with purpose. She was out of bed and racing through corridors before conscious thought caught up. Guards were stationed throughout the castle, but they didn't know yet, didn't sense what she could sense. Alpha! She burst into Godric's chambers without knocking, finding him already half awake, responding to some instinct of his own. There are intruders, at least 6, maybe more, coming from the east side. They mean harm. Godric didn't question how she knew. He simply acted, sending out the mental call that would rouse his warriors, pulling on weapons and armor with speed born of experience. Within minutes, the castle defense mobilized. The attackers were mercenaries, hired by someone wealthy enough to want revenge even after Lucinda's banishment, whether sent by the former Luna herself or by Fairmont relatives seeking to erase the scandal's witnesses. It didn't matter. They were skilled, well-armed, and had infiltrated farther than they should have been able to. But they hadn't counted on Iris's newly awakened abilities. The rare gift her bloodline carried, the capacity to sense malicious intent, to feel danger before it struck, gave Valdrin's forces just enough warning to intercept the attack before it reached vulnerable areas. The battle was brief and brutal. Oswin led the defense with tactical precision while Godric himself took down the mercenary leader. When dawn broke, 6 attackers lay dead, and 3 were captured for questioning. Pack members gathered in the courtyard as the prisoners were secured, their voices buzzing with questions and fear. Then someone noticed Iris standing beside the Alpha, her amber eyes still carrying flecks of gold, her posture no longer submissive but straight with quiet confidence. "She saved us," a young guard announced. "She sensed them coming before any of us knew." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The girl they'd dismissed as a broken servant had proven herself more valuable than any of them could have imagined. Respect, grudging but real, replaced the pity and dismissal they'd shown before. That evening, Godric called a full pack assembly. Iris stood at his side, no longer hidden or protected, but presented as his equal. The entire territory gathered in the Great Hall, tension crackling through the air. "You all know what happened last night," Godric began, his alpha voice carrying to every corner. "We were attacked by mercenaries seeking revenge for Lucinda's exposure. We survived because of one person's courage and gifted foresight." He turned to Iris, his expression softening. "Iris has proven herself worthy of respect, of honor, of a place in this pack that goes far beyond what anyone expected." He dropped to one knee before her, and the hall went utterly silent. "Iris, you are my true mate. My wolf has known it since the moment I truly saw you, and my heart has learned it in the weeks since. I'm asking you now, in front of witnesses. Not because protocol demands it, but because I want you to have the choice Lucinda never gave you." He took her hand gently. "Will you be my Luna? Not out of duty or politics, but because we choose each other?" Tears spilled down Iris's cheeks, but her voice was steady. "Yes." The pack erupted in cheers, not universal, but genuine from those who mattered. The claiming ceremony happened that night under the full moon, with pack witnesses and the council's blessing. Godric's bite marked her throat, her own teeth breaking his skin in the reciprocal claim that made them equals. When they came together in the privacy of his chambers, when the bond sealed completely, Iris's wolf finally broke free entirely. The full transformation she'd been denied for 10 years surged through her. Painful, yes, but transcendent. Her bones reshaped, fur erupted across her skin, and for the first time since she was 14, she stood on 4 legs as a complete shifter. Her wolf was smaller than Godric's, sleek and dark with amber eyes that gleamed with intelligence and hard-won strength. She wasn't the largest or most powerful shifter in the pack, but she was whole. Finally, blessedly whole. Godric's wolf nuzzled against hers, a gesture of tenderness that made her heart swell. They ran through the forest that night, 2 wolves moving as one, the bond between them singing with rightness. When they returned to human form at dawn, tangled in his bed with the first light creeping through windows, Iris touched the claiming mark on her throat with wonder. "I never thought I'd have this," she whispered. "Family, love, freedom." "You have all of it now," Godric promised, pulling her closer. "And I will spend every day making sure you never forget it." Chapter 8. Luna Ascendant. 6 months had reshaped everything. Iris stood at the head of the council table, her dark hair pulled back in a practical braid, rather than the elaborate styles Lucinda had demanded. The morning sun streaming through tall windows caught the Luna's mark on her throat, Godric's claiming bite, silvered with age but still visible. A badge of honor she wore proudly. "The harvest reports show improvement," Elder Thornwick said, sliding parchment across the polished wood. "Your reforms to the servant housing have increased productivity significantly. When people feel valued, they work harder. Iris studied the numbers with satisfaction. 3 months ago, she'd instituted sweeping changes to how the castle staff were treated. Proper sleeping quarters instead of cramped cells. Regular meals with adequate portions. A formal complaint system that allowed any servant to appeal directly to her or Godric if they were mistreated by their assigned families. Most controversially, she'd mandated monthly health examinations for all castle staff. The healer now screened for signs of abuse, malnutrition, or neglect. Any supervisor found harming those under their care faced immediate removal and potential banishment. The older pack members had grumbled about coddling servants. But the younger generation, those who'd witnessed Lucinda's fall, understood the message. Power without accountability was tyranny, and their Luna would tolerate neither. "There's one more matter," Elder Moira added carefully. "We've received word from the Eastern Territories. Lucinda was spotted attempting to secure a position in Alpha Garrett's household." Iris's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, a protective gesture she'd developed over the past weeks. And he rejected her application the moment he verified her identity. Her reputation precedes her now. No respectable alpha will risk the scandal of harboring someone with her documented history. Good, Iris thought but didn't say. She'd spent enough energy on Lucinda. The woman was someone else's problem now. Or more likely no one's problem, wandering as a rogue with nowhere to belong. Exactly the fate she'd inflicted on so many others. "Thank you for the update, Elder Moira. Is there anything else requiring immediate attention?" When the council shook their heads, Iris dismissed them with the easy authority she'd grown into over months of practice. Leadership wasn't about commanding through fear or manipulation. It was about listening, adapting, and making decisions that served the collective good rather than personal ambition. She found Godric in the training yards, working through combat drills with a group of young warriors. Even after years of marriage, the sight of him made her breath catch. All controlled power and lethal grace. His dark hair tied back, and his beard neat despite the exertion. He sensed her presence immediately, as he always did. Their mate bond humming with awareness. "Luna," he greeted formally for the benefit of the trainees, but his gray eyes warmed with affection meant only for her. "We're working on defensive formations. Would you care to demonstrate the detection technique?" This had become routine. Iris's rare gift, the ability to sense hostile intent before it manifested physically, made her an invaluable teacher. She'd spent the past months training scouts and guards to recognize the subtle signs she detected instinctively. "Positions!" she called out, and the young warriors scrambled to comply. For the next hour, Iris guided them through exercises designed to sharpen their awareness. She'd learned that her gift wasn't entirely unique. Other shifters possessed rudimentary versions of the same ability. With proper training, they could develop enhanced threat detection that made Valdrin's defenses nearly impenetrable. When the session ended, Godric caught her hand as they walked back toward the castle. The healer sent word. "She'd like to see you this afternoon." Iris's other hand moved to her stomach again, the secret she'd been carrying for 3 weeks pressing against her awareness. "I already know what she'll say." Godric stopped walking, turning to face her fully. "Iris, I'm pregnant." The words came out soft, almost reverent. "About 6 weeks, I think. I wanted to be certain before I told you." His expression transformed, shock melting into wonder, then fierce protectiveness. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head, while the other spread across her still flat abdomen. "Are you afraid?" She'd expected the question. After years of abuse and trauma, pregnancy represented vulnerability she'd once never imagined surviving. But she'd also spent months healing, learning to trust her own strength and the safety Godric provided. "No," she said honestly. "I'm not afraid. Not anymore." That evening, they announced the news to a private gathering of close friends. Mabel wept openly, pulling Iris into a fierce embrace that smelled of flower and herbs and home. The old cook had semi-retired from daily kitchen duties, but still supervised meal preparations, and had become the grandmother figure Iris had lost too young. "Your mother would be so proud," Mabel whispered. "So proud of the woman you've become." Oswin raised his cup in a solemn toast. "To the future heir of Valdrin. May they inherit their mother's wisdom and their father's strength." Later, alone in their chambers, Godric held Iris before the massive windows overlooking the territory spread below. The moon hung full and bright, painting everything in silver light that made the mountains look ethereal. "Do you remember the first night I brought you here?" he asked quietly. "After Lucinda was banished? You stood by this window like you couldn't believe it was real. I couldn't. I kept thinking I'd wake up back in that cell, that freedom was just another cruel dream." Iris turned in his arms to face him. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life, that I'm Luna, that I'm carrying our child, that I'm allowed to just be happy." "You're not allowed to be happy. You've earned it." Godric cupped her face with both hands, his touch infinitely gentle. "Every day, you prove that survival isn't just about enduring, it's about transforming. You took everything Lucinda tried to destroy and built something stronger from the ruins." Iris pressed her palm over his heart, feeling the steady rhythm that matched her own. Their bond thrummed between them, a constant reminder that she was no longer alone, no longer fighting just to make it through each day. She had purpose, partnership, peace. "The scars are still there," she said softly. "Physical ones faded, but the others, sometimes I wake up and forget I'm safe. Sometimes I still flinch when someone raises their hand too quickly. That's not weakness. That's memory. And memory keeps us vigilant." He kissed her forehead. "But it doesn't have to define us anymore." A knock interrupted the moment. One of the night guards entered at Godric's command, his expression apologetic. "Alpha, Luna, I apologize for the intrusion. There's a situation requiring your attention." A young woman arrived at the gates claiming sanctuary. She says she served as a personal attendant to a Luna in the Western Territories and has proof of systematic abuse. Iris and Godric exchanged glances, an entire conversation happening in the space between heartbeats. This would become their legacy, not just justice for Iris, but a precedent that abuse of power would no longer be tolerated in silence. "Bring her to the guest quarters," Iris said. "Make sure she's fed, given clean clothes, and knows she's safe. I'll speak with her in the morning." After the guard left, Godric pulled her close again. "You're going to help her." "Of course I am. Because someone helped me. Because someone saw me when I'd learned to be invisible." Iris looked up at her mate, her partner, the alpha who'd broken every expectation of what power should look like. "We're going to make sure every Luna in every territory knows that if they abuse those under their care, there will be consequences. Real ones. That's going to make us unpopular in certain circles. Good. I'd rather be unpopular and righteous than well-liked and complicit." They stood together at the window long into the night, two wolves who'd found each other against impossible odds. Iris thought about the girl she'd been 6 months ago, broken, terrified, convinced she deserved the suffering inflicted upon her. That girl was gone, transformed through fire into someone stronger, someone who could stand before a pack and command respect earned through wisdom rather than fear. Her parents would have been proud. The knowledge settled warm in her chest, easing an ache she'd carried for 14 years. She'd survived. More than that, she'd thrived. The promise she'd made to her dying mother, survive no matter what, had been kept in ways neither of them could have imagined. Iris's wolf stirred contentedly inside her, no longer trapped or silent, but an integral part of who she was. Free, whole, finally able to run without fear through forests that belonged to her as much as anyone. "What are you thinking about?" Godric asked, sensing the shift in her emotions through their bond. "That scars tell stories. Mine say I survived a monster wearing a beautiful face. That I was broken and learned to heal. That I was caged and earned my freedom." She placed both hands over her abdomen, where new life grew, and that our child will grow up knowing their mother was strong enough to transform pain into purpose. They'll also know their mother is brilliant, compassionate, and occasionally terrifying when someone threatens those under her protection. Iris laughed, the sound coming easier now than it had in the early days. "Only occasionally? I'm trying to be diplomatic." She turned in his arms, rising on her toes to kiss him with a passion that still surprised her. The realization that she could want someone without fear, could be intimate without expecting pain. That love didn't require submission or sacrifice of self, but rather the choice to stand beside someone as equals. When they finally pulled apart, Godric rested his forehead against hers. I love you, Luna of Valdrin. Today, tomorrow, every day we're given. I love you too, Alpha. My mate. My partner. My choice. Outside their windows, the moon continued its steady journey across the sky, illuminating a territory that was safer, more just, and more compassionate than it had been under previous leadership. Pack members slept secure in the knowledge that their Luna would protect them, not through fear or manipulation, but through genuine care for their well-being. And in the guest quarters, a young woman who'd fled abuse cried tears of relief, finally believing that sanctuary was more than just a word. Iris had kept her mother's final command: survive. But she'd done so much more than merely endure. She'd built a life worth living, created a legacy worth leaving, and found a love worth celebrating. The scars would always be there, reminders of battles fought and won. But they no longer defined her. They were simply part of her story, the dark chapters that made the bright ones shine all the more beautifully.